How's it going, guys? It's Avi from Nor'easters Today is November 22nd, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at this snowstorm, which will impact Maine primarily and extremely higher elevations of the Northeast, as well as the future snowstorm that's expected to impact the Midwest going into this Thanksgiving weekend, as well as a much bigger pattern change that's expected to happen in the United States heading into December, where we could see a lot more nor'easters and a lot more powerful storms move through the United States. So first, let's talk about what's happening right now with this snowstorm that's expected to impact primarily Maine and New Hampshire. And then eventually we'll talk about the Midwest snowstorm and the new pattern change that's expected to happen in the that could bring more nor'easters and powerful storms. So taking a look at the current radar, you see that for the most part, the United States is under rainfall. We're seeing a pretty long band of rain, which contains mainly moderate rain to some bouts of heavier rain down towards Kentucky. However, most of the snow is just above the upstate New York and Canada border at this point, bringing pretty heavy snow to Ottawa and bringing snow to Quebec. And however, there are still some parts of the United States obviously getting impacted by snow, such as Maine will primarily be the only state that will experience much of any accumulating snowfall. Maybe in the higher elevations of New Hampshire and Vermont, you could experience some accumulating snowfall, but other than that, it will be mainly an interior northeast effect and won't really affect much, and won't really affect the higher populated areas, which might be good news for people or might be bad news if you like the snow. But yeah, it'll mainly impact Maine for the most part. And in terms of snowfall accumulation that's forecasted for Maine, you could experience up to 5 to 8 inches right around just to the north and west of Caribou, and Caribou should experience around 1 to 3 inches of snow, and then 3 to 5 also in more isolated areas, and then in some portions of, let's say, the Green Mountains, or White Mountains. I forgot which one, what they're called, to be honest. You guys could let me know in the comments, if it's called the Green Mountains or White Mountains. I can't think of it on top of my head right now, but you could experience some higher snowfall accumulation in the higher elevations of New Hampshire, as well as the extremely northern portion of Vermont. But other than that, no one will really experience much of any accumulating snow. So keep in mind in Maine, especially for Thanksgiving travel, prepare for snow in that region. Now moving on to the Midwest snowstorm that we've been talking about over the past several videos. And now I think there's very high confidence that we will experience accumulating snowfall all throughout this region. Well, it's pretty much certain that we will at this point, and we're pretty certain how much snow will fall at this point and who will be impacted, since we're only about less than 2 days from the actual event. So by that time, once we're around that time frame where we're only 1 to 2 days away from the event, that pretty much means that we have high confidence of what is going to happen. There still could be some changes, and and the forecast could definitely screw up, even if it's only hours away, since we've seen that before with a couple of snowstorms. But for the most part, you will experience for the most part in the Great Lakes region 1 to 3 to 5 inches, and then I would say the isolated areas might get a little bit more than 5 inches. However, for the most part, it should snow right around 3 to 5 inches throughout Wisconsin, extending towards even the northwestern portion of Iowa, just north and east of Des Moines, Iowa, and even Chicago might get in the mix with 1 to 3 inches of snow expected. Minneapolis, it's around 1 to 3, but borderline in the 3 to 5 category. So keep that in mind if you're around the Minneapolis area. Green Bay around 1 to 3 inches, and then a lot of Wisconsin will be under 3 to 5 inches of snow, with some isolated areas around 5 to 8. So while this won't be anything major, this won't cause extreme havoc, it still could definitely cause some havoc, especially since this snow is expected to fall at a very fast pace. But the good news is, like this interactive radar is showing, it isn't really expected that that it'll stick for much longer, because after it snows in a lot of these regions, the snow will eventually change over to rain, and that rain will definitely help wash away a lot of the snow that will accumulate over the Great Lakes region. And you see that even though it isn't a ton of snow in Chicago, around Tuesday morning, you could experience potentially 1 inch per hour snowfall rates, as that snow is going to fall at a very fast pace in and around Chicago. And throughout Wisconsin, you could experience heavier bouts of snow and snow that will fall in very fast rates, as well as extending all the way to the Minneapolis area. You could experience snow that could fall at a very fast pace as well. So do not keep your guard down if you're along those regions just because it's only gonna snow 3 to 5 inches. However, the good news is, like I said, that rain will wash it away, and it'll be much easier for snow plows to quickly plow the streets and clean up the streets with snow, since the rain is gonna definitely help wash a lot of the snow away. And then you see that snow heading into Tuesday night extends all the way to Michigan, where you could experience heavier bouts of snowfall as well, just north of Lansing, Michigan. So keep that in mind if you're in Michigan, and keep that in mind for Thanksgiving travel, because I know Tuesday for a lot of people is a very big day for Thanksgiving travel. So if you're in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, there's definitely something you need to watch, and it might be good to maybe make some arrangements if you're traveling during the time of this event, since you definitely don't want to risk driving in a snowstorm that could potentially bring 1 inch per hour snowfall rates in some areas. While it's only 3 to 5 inches for the most part, it still could cause some havoc in terms of travel. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. So in terms of what could change in the forecasts, to be honest, I think Chicago, for a lot of, and it goes the same for a lot of cities as well, it's going to be a little bit difficult to forecast how much snow you'll receive, because while the current forecast is 1 to 3, in cities, the snowfall, especially when it's an event where it isn't entirely certain that you'll experience temperatures below 32 degrees, it's going to be very hard to pinpoint how much snow you'll get, because there's a possibility you might not even get any snow, because the heat of the ground and the heat of the pavement in Chicago and in the buildings and a lot of the city will pretty much keep the snowfall from accumulating on the streets. So we have to keep that in mind, that there's still that possibility that a city like Chicago or Milwaukee might not experience much of any accumulating snow because of the heat of the pavement. And obviously in cities where there's a lot more pavement stores more heat than let's say dirt or grass. So it's entirely possible that all this snow completely melts as it touches pavement, as the temperature of the pavement will definitely determine how much snow you'll receive around Chicago and in the inner city areas. So we definitely have to keep that in mind as well. However, I would say for the more rural areas and headed up north of Chicago, I think it's pretty much guaranteed at this point you're going to experience accumulating snow. So keep that in mind. And in terms of the changes in forecasts that could happen, I don't see much that could change at this point, as both the GFS model and the European model are in very strong agreement about the track of this, how strong this will be. And I doubt that there will be any major differences in the forecasts or in what actually happens, unless there's a huge plunge of cold air, which is near impossible at this point to maybe, which would strengthen it if that were to happen. But it seems unlikely, as the GFS and the European have pretty much pinpointed how much instability there will be, and there won't really be a lot of instability to make the storm entirely strong or dump more than the done more than the forecasted 3 to 5 inches. So I would prepare as if you're going to experience 3 to 5 inches and maybe more, just to be safe, more safe than sorry, along Michigan, and Wisconsin and Minnesota, and even extending as far to south as Illinois and Iowa. So keep that in mind in those regions. But now let's talk about the pattern that's expected to change. A major pattern that's expected to change in the United States going into December, because I find it very interesting, because it could definitely change a lot of what you'll experience headed into December. Now, I know I usually say that I don't like to go more than 5 days out, but when we're seeing the European model and the GFS model starting to lean towards a certain direction and a certain pattern change, it seems more likely that something big is going to happen headed into December. Because if we move to the 120-hour mark, which is just 5 days out, you see that there's a big dip in the jet stream, and that's very interesting because for those who do not want to see any storms, a big dip in the jet stream is never good news when it comes to the United States, because when there's a big dip, there's a lot of cold air that plunges in and pretty much mixes in with the warmer air, and that creates a lot of instability, and that instability creates convection, and as a result of the convection, a new storm or low pressure system forms. So when we see that big dip in the jet stream, that's never really good, because that means a big storm is expected to come, or not a big storm, but at least a storm is expected to form. And as a result of this big dip, you see day 6 that jet stream dip continues, and then going to day 7, you see that there's a pretty big storm that forms. That's 989 millibars. We see a huge dip in the jet stream and a lot of cold air on the back side of it. And it's likely that you're going to experience stronger winds as a result of a low pressure this low, where the cold air is trying to filter into that warmer air that's along the East Coast. And as a result, it's likely you're going to experience a lot more wind with a storm scenario like this. And the GFS model is also sort of agreeing with this pattern change, where we're going to see a pretty big dip in the jet stream and potentially a much stronger storm going into December, where we could see that it drop down to 982 millibars. Obviously, this is very far out. A lot could change. However, I just find it interesting that both computer models are expecting a big dip in the jet stream going 5 days out. And for me, like I always say, when it's within 5 days, it's in the window of possibilities. And since both of the computer models are agreeing with about this forecast 5 days out, it shows that there's going to be a pattern change where there's going to be a big dip in the jet stream and potentially a lot more nor'easters, or at least much bigger extratropical cyclones than we've been seeing over the past several weeks. So we could experience much more weather and much more storms as a result of this, and a lot more cold air on the back along the Midwest and potentially the East Coast if that jet stream dip pattern continues long enough. And even I'm going crazy here, going well beyond 7 days, but you see that after this pattern change, the GFS is expecting that jet stream dip to continue and another storm to form. And then if we take a look at the European as well, it seems like it's also agreeing that even well beyond the 7-day mark, that jet stream dip will still be there and we'll experience a lot more storms as a result of this. We have to see if it lasts that long. It's far from certain. I don't want to jump to a conclusion at this point. I just want to point out that around 5 days out, there's expected to be a dip in the jet stream, and that definitely could create some convection and potentially some and that in the future could potentially bring a lot more stronger storms and a lot more snowstorms and blizzards impacting potentially the Great Lakes region, the Midwest, or the Northeast, and potentially more thunderstorm activity in the South with all this instability as a result of this jet stream. So I just wanted to point that out, and we definitely have to see what happens over the next several days. Who knows, maybe that the jet stream dip won't be as big and we won't see that pattern pack as much of a punch, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with a lot of these troughs that are going to move through the United States, because the main reason why this jet stream dip is occurring is because an Alberta clipper is going to move down just south enough to bring a polar plunge throughout the United States, and that's going to create the instability to create a lot new storms in the United States. So we have to see just how far south that Alberta clipper goes, because if it goes further north, then there's less likely to be a major pattern change. However, if it goes further south, then we're more likely to see bigger storms and a pattern change that encourages storm and low pressure development. So we have to see what happens beyond 5 days and over the next several days, and just make sure to check with your local forecast over the next several days, as it'll be important to see what's going to happen going into December. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you like this video. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to share with friends and family who may be interested. And I hope you guys have a good night.